Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be talking to you guys about keeping you and your baby healthy. So this is all about having a healthy pregnancy while being on a budget. So, moms that, might be a little tighter with their income, so that can be a struggle that can really affect, what we're eating or access to healthy foods and things like that. So I just want to give you guys some tools and figure out the best ways to do that. So my name is Abby Odom. I went to Clemson University and got a Bachelor's of Science in Animal and Veterinary Sciences. And so while I was there doing that, I learned a lot about animal nutrition as well as the food and meat industry. So while I was doing that, I really got this spark of interest in human nutrition. So I'm there, I'm learning about what these animals are eating and what that means for their bodies, and then I'm learning about us eating them. And I was like, well, what does that mean for us? And so now I'm working on my master's at the University of New England. I'm in the Master's of Science in Applied Nutrition. I'm currently a candidate working on my degree. So I do have some relevant coursework in nutrition from my bachelor's and obviously now in my master's. I have some volunteer experience with some after school programs. So there, in multiple programs, I worked with feeding children after school and doing a little bit of tutoring and things like that. So I kind of figured out a little bit more about, what kids like to eat, some challenges that they face, eating at school, and then eating at home and things like that. Also worked at a restaurant for 2 years, and so that taught me a lot about, portion sizes and in the restaurant business, foods that are popular, things that people like to eat, and then, some things that the restaurant industry uses to make us desire certain foods. Also have some field experience with low-income women. I've worked with a lot of low-income families and things, providing them with food and stuff like that. So I know some of the struggles they face. Kind of a personal reason. I grew up in a low-income family. I remember the foods that my mom prepared. I know that how that's affected me later in life, as well as how it affected me then. So I think it makes a big difference to have access to information about what's good for you. I think it all comes down to a little bit of education. So it's all about, knowing what's good for you and knowing how to be healthy. And that's all that people need a lot of times to make the right choices. So that's kind of what has inspired me to pursue this seminar and choose this topic. So what we're going to look at today. So with this seminar, I really want to aim it towards overweight and obese women. So we're seeing a higher number of pregnant women in America that are overweight or obese. We're also seeing women of childbearing age, so women who are at an age where they could become pregnant and have kids. We're seeing a lot of them, an even higher percentage of the pregnant ones, in our, non-pregnant women of childbearing age. We're seeing them be overweight and obese, a higher number, and it's growing. And then so what we're going to look at, is who are these women, what's identifying them, what can be causing them to be this way, and have this problem. We're also going to look at what this means for you. So it's going to affect your health, it's going to affect your baby's health, and it's going to affect your future and your baby's future. So we're going to look at what all that means. And then lastly, really the goal of this is to give you guys tools. I want you guys to leave here with some certain objectives and things that I'm going to talk about later. But we're going to do bingo. We're going to look at a little menu, and we're going to, come up with some ideas and brainstorm about how we can be healthier at home. That's going to go over what we're going to eat, and what we can do to be healthier. So learning objectives I was mentioning, the first one is I want you guys to be able to recognize healthy diet patterns. So, healthy snacks, healthy meals, things that are healthy to eat, and then some habits, some of the things you go to, some of the stuff you do regularly. I want you to just be able to recognize healthy ones. So I just want you to have the knowledge of what's healthy. Secondly, I want you to understand some exercises you can do while you're pregnant, and then some activity levels while you're pregnant, like what's appropriate for a pregnant woman. How often should you exercise? What exercises are appropriate, what's safe, I also want you guys to know the risks and the diseases we see with overweight and obese women when they're pregnant. So there are a lot of risks that are associated with being in a larger weight category, when you're not pregnant and when you're pregnant. Lastly, I want you to have the tools. Like I was saying, I want this to be a little toolbox. I want you to be able to refer back to this, and pull out, your tips and tricks on how to be healthier. So I want you guys to have some that are going to help you establish those healthy activity and diet patterns. So, healthy meal options and healthy exercise patterns at home. So to get started, I want to talk to you guys about overweight and obesity. So in health, we look at BMI a lot. So that's your body mass index. BMI is what we refer to when we're looking at people's likelihood of certain conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that. And everyone's in a certain category. So this all depends on your weight and your height. It's you're going to be your weight in kilograms and your height in meters. I know in America we don't usually use that system, so there's a little bit of overlap you have to kind of find when it comes to changing over from your height, from inches to meters and pounds to kilograms, things like that. So there's a lot of calculators online you can find that'll help you. And so just an example, if you are 5'3", which is 63 inches, and you weigh 155 pounds, you're going to find yourself at about 27 BMI. So I found that from taking our weight in kilograms, which would be about 70, and dividing it by our height in meters, which would be 1.6, and multiplying that times itself. So 1.6 times 1.6. And then so we're going to take 70 and divide it by 1.6 times 1.6, and that's going to give us 27. So that's where we're going to find our BMI. And as you can see in our little chart underneath here, that's going to be right in the middle of our overweight category. So if you do this calculation yourself, or if you find a calculator online, below 18.5 is underweight. Normal is 18.5 to 24.9. Like I was saying, overweight is 25 to 29.9. Obese, 30 to 34.9. And then extremely obese or morbidly obese is anything above 35. So those are just some of the categories we use, in health and in the medical field to categorize our risk for things. And it's usually going to reflect your fat, but it is kind of a general calculation. So it's not always 100% reliable, but it's a very useful tool when we're looking at some risk factors. Okay, so here's some numbers for you guys. So what we're seeing right now in the U.S. is about 40% of the pregnant women are obese or overweight. So, that's a little under half. That's a pretty large percentage there. We're seeing higher prevalences of this, higher proportion in certain ethnicities. So non-Hispanic blacks, Native Americans, Samoans, Central and South Americans, and Hawaiians, we're seeing are more likely to be overweight or obese while they're pregnant. We also see that women who have a lower income, so some people are going to refer to this as a lower socioeconomic status. So basically your income per year is, below a certain amount. It's in a certain range, and that's going to mark you as being lower income. So in the research, we've just seen that women that are lower income are more likely to be overweight or obese. A lot of times this is attributed to, eating more fast food or getting less exercise, things like that. So one of the most alarming statistics is that, for a while there, we thought that overweight and obesity while you're pregnant was kind of plateauing, so it was kind of evening out, but we're actually seeing now that it's still growing. So we have all these risks and things associated with being, overweight and obese while you're pregnant, and more women are entering that BMI range. So that means more women are being exposed to these risk factors that can harm you and your baby. So that's a big deal, and that's something we really want to change. So why are these ladies overweight or obese? There's 4 things here that are going to contribute. The first is going to be your health literacy. So literacy, we use that word in reading, and it's pretty much the same use here. So health literacy is going to be how how much you know about health and then your ability to understand what you've been taught about health. So, the problem is, not everyone has the same literacy. So, maybe you went to the doctor, um, and, they may have told you some things about health that were, things that were good for you, but, maybe they used big words that were hard to understand, or, maybe they spoke too quickly, and you didn't catch what they were telling you about health. So that could interfere. Maybe you just haven't heard. No one's told you about what's good for you. That can contribute. So that's all going to come into health literacy. We also see that where you live is going to have impact. So, are you living on the side of town where there's all the fast food restaurants? And if that's what's around and that's what's convenient, that's what you're going to eat. If you're not around a market with fresh produce or somewhere that has, fish or lean chicken or something like that, it's going to be hard to find that food. So you're not going to eat that food. So that has, that can affect what you're eating. Thirdly, we're seeing, some women have an unhealthy relationship with food. That can be really common and really hard to overcome. So maybe, you're used to not always having food available at home. Maybe there's times where the fridge isn't full, the pantry isn't full. And so when you do have food, when there is stuff in the refrigerator and in the pantry, you just eat as much of it as you can because you're used to there not being food other times. And what that can do is it can make it to where you're eating too much at those times and it's making you gain weight. We're also seeing, depression and loneliness can have an effect. So if those are things you struggle with, they can make you eat more. So that also, comes into effect with that. Lastly, so like my history, I grew up in a family that ate a lot of really unhealthy foods, processed foods, mostly meat, things like that. That's what you're used to eating. That's what's yummy to you. That's what you enjoy. And so that's what you're going to eat when you're home. That's what you're going to eat when you go out to eat, at restaurants and such. So that can be hard to overcome. If your culture or the people, if your neighbors have cookouts and there's unhealthy food there, or the culture you come from usually eats unhealthy foods, that can also take an effect because that's what you like to eat. That's what you've historically eaten. So you've been eating in the past, so it's what you like now. You've grown to enjoy those foods, and so that can have an effect. So what does all this mean for your body? So for you, being overweight or obese while you're pregnant, it can make your blood pressure higher. So in this photo here, we've got, a doctor taking a pregnant woman's blood pressure. So that's that little cuff they put around your arm at the doctor. It, blows up with air and gets really tight. So it's measuring your blood pressure. So if that gets too high, that can increase your risk for stroke and things like that, that, are not good things, not things you want to be at risk for. We also see an increase in the number of women who have gestational diabetes. So gestational diabetes is when you get diabetes when you're pregnant. This, is usually where, your body stops making insulin. So insulin is something that your body makes when you eat sugar. So it's either not making as much insulin or your body's not responding to the insulin that you are making anymore. So it gets used to seeing that much insulin. So it, kind of stops responding. We're also seeing more oversized babies. So a lot of people, they're worried that the baby will be too small, but if they are too large, that's also a problem. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about some issues that causes for your baby, but it can cause issues for you. It can make it more likely that you'll need a C-section a lot of times. And then also being overweight and obese in general, even with a baby of normal size, can make you more likely to need a C-section, which carries its own risk factors and things. So, in terms of your baby, like I was saying, that size, we call that fetal macrosomia. So you can see I have a little chart here at the bottom of the page. That's going to be, above 8.8 pounds on average, about 11 pounds. And the larger your baby is, the more likely you are to need a C-section. And that's not something, that we want, versus vaginal delivery. We also see babies that are born too early. So your pregnancy is going to last roughly 40 weeks. And a baby that's born before that, that carries risk factors. So, every time, when you're overweight and obese, you're more likely to develop these conditions. And then those can make it more likely for other bad things to happen. So it kind of has a domino effect. Something, is one of the most worrisome the facts I've got in this seminar is that when you're overweight and obese, when your baby's between, less than one, they're about twice as likely to die. So